My name is Victoria Russell, 32 years old, and I never thought I'd be the one to make my father cry. Growing up, he seemed invincible wealth, powerful, and always in control. But last month, when I cut him off financially after decades of his manipulation, something changed. "Fix this now, it's not funny," he spat, his face flushed with anger. I just smirked and said, "Take a cab home, loser." If you're watching this, drop a comment telling me where you're from, and hit subscribe to follow my journey from doormat to backbone. I grew up in a sprawling colonial home in Greenwich, Connecticut, where the manicured lawns and luxury cars in every driveway were as common as leaves on trees. My father, Thomas Russell, was a self-made real estate tycoon who started with nothing but a loan from a distant uncle and an unrelenting drive to succeed. Everyone in our social circle admired him. The man who came from dirt-poor beginnings in rural Pennsylvania and built an empire worth millions through sheer determination and business acumen. What they didn't see was how that same determination morphed into control when it came to his family. My mother, Eleanor, was the buffer between my father's intensity and us kids. She was graceful, artistic, and had a way of softening his sharp edges with just a look or gentle touch. I remember watching them at parties, how she could redirect his attention when business talk got too heated, or calm him with a whispered word when someone challenged him. They were a perfect balance until they weren't. Cancer took her when I was 15. It was aggressive pancreatic cancer that went from diagnosis to funeral in just under 4 months. I still remember the smell of lilies at her service, how they made me nauseated, and how my father stood stoic throughout, not a single tear visible, though his eyes were hollow. Something changed in him after we lost Mom. The little warmth he had shown as a father evaporated. Money and status became his entire focus, his only language of love. Gifts replaced conversations. Expectations replaced encouragement. My brother James was 18 when Mom died, ready for college and escape. He chose a university on the opposite coast, then took a job in London after graduation. Smart move. He got away. We stayed close through calls and visits, but he was free from the daily pressure of being Thomas Russell's child. I became the good daughter by default, the one who stayed, the one who tried desperately to earn the love and approval that became increasingly conditional. While James pursued his own path in international finance, I abandoned my dreams of studying art and followed father to his alma mater, Yale, for a business degree I never wanted. "Art is a hobby, Victoria, not a career," he told me while reviewing my college applications. "No daughter of mine will waste a world-class education on something that won't provide security." I didn't argue. I rarely did back then. After graduation, there was no question where I'd work. Father had a position waiting for me at Russell Properties, assistant to the marketing director, to start with a clear path upward as long as I proved my worth, and didn't expect special treatment. Those were his exact words on my first day, said in front of the entire executive team during morning briefing. For 10 years, I worked under his shadow. Every achievement questioned as possible nepotism. Every mistake magnified as proof I wasn't truly capable. In meetings, he'd critique my presentations more harshly than anyone else's. If I succeeded, it was because of the Russell name. If I failed, it was despite it. My best friend Zoe saw what was happening long before I did. We'd been close since sophomore year of college when we were paired as roommates. She came from a warm, boisterous family in New Mexico, where opinions were expressed openly, but never used as weapons. "Your father treats you like an employee, not a daughter," she'd tell me during our weekly wine nights, the only time I truly felt like myself. "That's just his way I defend him. He wants me to be strong." There's a difference between strengthening someone and breaking them. She'd counter, refilling my glass. "And Victoria, honey, you deserve so much more." But breaking free seemed impossible. Every aspect of my life was intertwined with my father. My condo was in a building he owned. My car was leased through the company. My health insurance retirement plan, even my social circle, was connected to him. Breaking away would mean starting completely over at 32. Still, something was shifting inside me. Small rebellions began. I cut my hair from the long professional style he preferred to a short asymmetrical bob that made him frown every time he saw it. I started dating Ryan, a musician who played at local bars and taught guitar lessons for a living, everything my father despised in a potential son-in-law. He'll never amount to anything, father said after meeting Ryan once. You need someone with ambition, someone worthy of a Russell. Those words echoed in my head for weeks afterward. Not because I thought Ryan was the one, we were casual at best, but because it crystallized something I'd always suspected in my father's eyes. Even the people I loved needed to be worthy of him, not me. The whispers of change were growing louder. I just needed the courage to listen. Most people don't realize how completely financial control can trap you, even when you're earning a good salary. On paper, I was successful. Marketing director at Russell Properties by age 30, with a compensation package most people would envy. But the reality was far different. Every dollar I earned went into accounts my father managed through what he called our family office, essentially a small team of financial advisors who handled the Russell family wealth. I received a monthly allowance for personal expenses, deposited like clockwork into a checking account my father had access to. Any purchase over $500 required his approval, which meant explaining and justifying everything from a weekend trip with friends to a new winter coat. Financial discipline is how wealth grows. He'd lecture whenever I questioned the arrangement. I'm protecting your future. The luxury condo I lived in, owned by Russell Properties, with my rent automatically deducted from my salary at a rate my father called family discount, but I later learned was actually above market value. The Mercedes. I drove a company car with strict mileage limits for personal use. Even my smartphone and laptop were company property, which I discovered meant everything could be monitored. I didn't realize how abnormal this was until a casual lunch with colleagues from other companies. They were discussing investments, property purchases, even vacation homes. When they asked about my financial plans, I had nothing to contribute. At 32, I had never independently bought anything more substantial than clothing and groceries. The turning point came during a routine check of my credit score. I'd set up alerts for any changes, a habit my father actually encouraged, as responsible financial management. When I received notification of a new credit inquiry, I was confused I hadn't applied for anything. The inquiry came from a high-end boat dealership in Miami. My father was expanding the family's portfolio of recreational assets, as he called it, and had used my excellent credit as part of a financing application, without asking, without even mentioning it. That same week, I discovered he'd been regularly accessing my personal bank statements, not the accounts he managed, the small private checking account I'd opened at a local credit union specifically to have some financial privacy, the account where I deposited cash gifts from relatives, the occasional freelance design project I did on the side, and the small inheritance from my maternal grandmother. I'm just making sure you're being smart with your money, he said when confronted, not even bothering to deny it. As your father and financial advisor, I have that right. But the final straw came from Sandra, my boss's assistant. She'd overheard a conversation between my father and William, the company's CEO, about my potential promotion to chief marketing officer. Your father told William you weren't ready, she whispered during a coffee break. Said you needed at least 2 more years of seasoning before handling that level of responsibility. William was actually pushing for you, but your dad shut it down. I felt physically ill. The promotion I'd been working toward for years, the one my father had supposedly been grooming me for, had been within reach, and he'd sabotaged it. Not because I wasn't capable, but because keeping me in a subordinate position maintained his control. That night I called James in London. It was the first time I'd ever openly criticized our father to him. You're just now figuring this out, my brother asked, his voice gentle despite the blunt words. Vic, he's been doing this to you your entire adult life. I've tried to tell you, but you weren't ready to hear it. What do? I asked, feeling both childish and terrified. You get your own life, James said simply. But carefully. Dad won't let go easily. The next day I opened a new bank account at a bank our family had no relationship with. I set up direct deposit for a percentage of my salary small enough not to raise flags in the accounting department, which reported to my father. I began researching apartments outside the Russell Properties portfolio. and I made an appointment with Marcus Williams, a financial advisor. Zoe had recommended someone with no connections to my father or his businesses. Marcus was blunt after reviewing my situation. Ms. Russell, what you're describing borders on financial abuse. It's not uncommon in wealthy families, but that doesn't make it healthy or normal. He helped me understand my complete financial picture for the first time. I learned that my mother had left trust funds for both James and me, trusts that should have transferred fully to our control at age 25. James had received his, but somehow mine remained under my father's management. I also discovered that the family investments my money had been funding included covering significant gambling losses my father had accrued in recent years, losses he'd hidden from everyone. Your father has been borrowing against family assets to cover personal debts, Marcus explained, showing me documentation he'd obtained through his investigation. It's legal since he has authority, but ethically questionable, especially since some of those assets are technically yours. With Marcus's help, I began documenting everything. Every account, every transaction, every instance of financial control. I consulted with Diana Stevenson, an attorney specializing in estate disputes and financial elder abuse, though in my case, it was the child being controlled, not the parent. You have a strong case for financial emancipation, Diana assured me, but prepare yourself. Men like your father don't surrender control willingly. For 6 months, I lived a double life. Obedient daughter and employee by day, secretly planning my independence by night. I secured an apartment in a neighboring town, transferred savings incrementally to avoid detection, and worked with Diana to prepare legal documents, asserting control over my trust and personal finances. When everything was in place, I felt ready. Not confident, but ready. The stage was set for a confrontation that would either free me or cost me everything. I chose a Sunday family dinner for the confrontation. My father had always insisted on these monthly dinners ostensibly to maintain family connections, but really to keep tabs on my life. With my brother overseas, it was just the two of us in the cavernous dining room of the Greenwich House, sitting at opposite ends of a table that could seat 16. The housekeeper, Maria, had prepared his favorite meal, prime rib with Yorkshire pudding and roasted vegetables. My father was in a particularly good mood that evening, having closed a major commercial development deal the previous week. He was in his element, enjoying good food and pontificating about business strategy. I heard you tried to move some of your trust fund into private equity last month, he mentioned casually between bites. Good thing Patterson flagged it for me. Those returns looked impressive on paper, but the risk profile was all wrong for your portfolio. It was a perfect opening, though my heart pounded so hard, I was sure he could hear it across the table. I took a slow sip of water, buying seconds to steady my voice. Actually, I said, setting down my glass, I've been meaning to discuss my finances with you. Father continued, cutting his meat, barely looking up. What about them? If you need an increase in your allowance, we can review the numbers after quarter-end reports. I don't need an increase, I said, my voice stronger than I expected. I need independence. I'm 32 years old, and it's time I managed my own money. That got his attention. He set down his knife and fork, giving me the evaluating look I'd seen him use on junior executives before dismissing their proposals. You don't have the expertise or experience for that, he said flatly. Financial management is complex, Victoria. It's my responsibility to protect the family wealth, including yours. I've hired someone to help me, I replied, forcing myself to maintain eye contact despite the flush of anxiety creeping up my neck. A financial advisor with no connection to Russell Properties or our family. Father's expression hardened, but he kept his tone even. A waste of money, but if it makes you feel more involved, we can arrange for quarterly meetings with Patterson where you can ask questions. You're not understanding me, I said. I'm not asking for more involvement in your management of my money. I'm telling you that I'm taking control of my finances completely. Effective immediately. He actually chuckled, assuming this was some temporary rebellion he could humor until it passed. Victoria, don't be dramatic. You know nothing about. I know that my mother left me a trust that should have been under my sole control since I turned 25. I interrupted something I'd never dared do before. I know that you've been using my excellent credit history to secure loans for your personal investments. And I know about the gambling debts you've been hiding. The color drained from his face. Who have you been talking to? Rather than answering, I reached for my purse and removed the folder Diana had prepared. I slid several documents across the table. These are the legal papers transferring control of my trust fund to me. This one removes your access to all of my personal accounts. And this, I said, pushing forward, the final document, is notification that I've established a new financial identity completely separate from Russell family accounts. Father didn't touch the papers. He stared at them as if they might burn him. I've already filed these with the appropriate institutions. I continued when he remained silent. As of yesterday, you no longer have access to my finances. The explosion I'd expected didn't come immediately. Instead, my father slowly walked to the bar cart in the corner, and poured himself a generous scotch, which he drank half of in one swallow. This is how you repay everything I've done for you, he finally said, his voice deceptively calm. After all, I've sacrificed to give you a life of privilege and opportunity. You've given me things, Dad, I acknowledged, but you've taken my autonomy. There's a difference between supporting someone and controlling them. Controlling, he repeated, voice rising. I've protected you. You'd have nothing without me. I'd have freedom, I countered, and that's worth more than all of this. I gestured around the opulent dining room. The calm facade cracked. You ungrateful, foolish girl, you have no idea what you're doing. Without my guidance, you'll lose everything. Maybe, I conceded, but they'll be my mistakes to make. He stormed back to the table, towering over me. Fix this now. It's not funny, he spat, face flushed with anger, jabbing his finger at the papers I'd brought. In that moment, looking up at my father's contorted face, something shifted inside me. The fear dissolved, replaced by a clarity I'd never experienced before. I stood gathering my purse and the untouched documents he'd refused to acknowledge. I think we're done here, I said calmly. I'll see myself out. You're making the biggest mistake of your life, he hissed, following me toward the foyer. You'll come crawling back when you realize you can't survive without me. I turned at the door, surprising myself with a smirk. Take a cab home, loser. The words weren't planned. They just bubbled up from some newly discovered well of courage inside me. I'd never spoken to my father that way before, never would have dared. But in that moment, watching his eyes widen with shock at my disrespect, I felt a power I hadn't known existed. I walked out before he could respond, got into my car and drove away from the house I'd grown up in, unsure if I'd ever return. The first message arrived before I even got back to my apartment. You will regret this. Simple, direct threatening. Classic Thomas Russell. By morning, there were 17 more. By the end of the following day, my phone had logged 64 messages from my father. They ranged across the emotional spectrum in a way I'd never witnessed from him before. The threats came first. I'll cut you off completely. You'll lose your job. I'll make sure no one in this industry ever hires you. When those didn't receive a response, he switched to guilt. After everything I've sacrificed for you, your mother would be ashamed. Is this how I raised you to behave? Next came something I'd never heard from my father, apologies, though manipulative ones. I only wanted what was best for you. Perhaps I was too protective. We can discuss a more gradual transition to independence. Finally, financial warnings. The market is too volatile for someone with your limited experience. You'll be bankrupt within a year. That advisor is probably scamming you. I read each message, but responded to none. Diana had advised complete communication blackout until the financial transitions were fully processed. Any engagement could be used against me if my father decided to legally challenge my actions. 3 days after our confrontation, I arrived at my office to find my key card deactivated. Security called the CEO, who came down to the lobby personally. I'm sorry, Victoria. Williams had genuine regret in his eyes. Your father has placed you on administrative leave pending a review of marketing department expenditures. It was a transparent excuse. As expected, my father was using his position as founder and majority shareholder to punish me professionally. I understand, I told William, handing over my company phone and laptop. Will someone box up my personal items, or should I come back after hours? William looked uncomfortable. I'll have everything sent to your address on file. Better make that my new address, I said, writing it down for him. I've recently moved. The reality of my situation hit hard as I left the building. I was now unemployed, cut off from the only professional network I'd ever known, and facing my father's wrath. The panic attack hit me in the parking garage, racing heart, shortness of breath. The certainty that I was making a catastrophic mistake. I called Zoe from my car, barely able to speak through the anxiety. I'm coming over right now, she said. Just breathe. You're doing the right thing, and you are not alone. My brother James called that night, having received an expletive-filled tirade from our father. He says you've lost your mind, James reported, sounding more impressed than concerned. Also, that you're ungrateful, manipulated by bad influences, and heading for disaster. That sounds about right, I admitted. I'm proud of you, Vic, he said softly. It's about time someone stood up to him. Mom would be proud too. Those words meant more than he could know. The following days brought escalating pressure. My father systematically worked to dismantle the life I'd built. He froze me out of the family home, informing the staff I was no longer welcome. He contacted mutual friends and colleagues, spinning a story about my mental health and poor judgment. Several people I'd considered friends called with concerns that sounded rehearsed, urging me to reconcile with my father before I ruined my life. The practical realities were equally challenging. I discovered my health insurance had been canceled. The lease on my Mercedes was terminated, requiring immediate return of the vehicle. Credit cards issued through family accounts were deactivated without notice, discovered embarrassingly at a grocery store checkout when my payment was declined. For the first time in my adult life, I had to create an actual budget. My savings would cover expenses for several months, and the trust fund provided a financial cushion many people didn't have. But the adjustment was still jarring. No more $200 dinners or impulse shopping. No more housekeeping service or premium gym membership. Marcus helped me establish financial priorities and realistic expectations. Your standard of living will change, he warned, but not as drastically as your father wants you to believe. The key is making conscious choices rather than default ones. Meanwhile, Diana continued securing my legal position, ensuring my father couldn't find loopholes to reassert control. He's used to getting his way, she observed. Men like your father don't surrender power easily. Expect more pushback. It came in the form of an unexpected visit to my new apartment. I was settling in for a quiet evening when the building's security called up. There's a Thomas Russell here insisting you're expecting him, the guard said. I'm not, I replied. Please don't let him up. 20 minutes later, my phone exploded with notifications. My father had created a scene in the lobby, loudly proclaiming concern about my mental state and threatening to call the police for a wellness check if I didn't agree to speak with him. I went downstairs, determined to end the spectacle before it escalated further. You need to leave, I told him firmly, aware of the security guard watching closely. I'm fine, as everyone can see. If you continue this behavior, I'll be the one calling the police. He stared at me as if seeing a stranger. Perhaps he was. The obedient daughter he'd controlled for decades had finally found her voice, and it was speaking words he never expected to hear. Being fired from Russell Properties was both devastating and liberating. I'd lost not just a job, but a professional identity I'd spent a decade building. Yet walking away from the office that day, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't even known I was carrying. Still, the reality of unemployment hit hard. My resume showed only one employer, my father's company. My professional references were all people who either reported to my father or feared crossing him. And in the close-knit world of Connecticut real estate development, his influence was extensive. I spent weeks submitting applications to marketing positions at companies I believed were beyond my father's reach. I landed several interviews that seemed promising, only to receive apologetic rejections afterward. I couldn't prove his interference, but the pattern was suspicious. After one particularly disappointing rejection, I met Zoe for coffee, fighting back tears of frustration. Maybe I should just move, I said. Start over somewhere he doesn't have connections. Or, Zoe suggested, stirring her latte thoughtfully, maybe you should stop trying to stay in the same lane. You never wanted to be in corporate marketing anyway. This could be your chance to pursue what you actually love. She was right. I'd abandoned my passion for art and design to please my father, convincing myself that practical career choices were the only valid ones. But circumstances had changed. If I was rebuilding my life anyway, why not rebuild it around what I actually enjoyed? The next day, I called Professor Winters, my favorite art instructor from college. Despite the years that had passed, she remembered me immediately. Victoria, your father finally loosened the leash. I take it? I laughed, surprised by her directness. You could say that, more like I slipped the collar completely. Good for you, she said warmly. Your talent was always there, just waiting for permission to flourish. What can I help with? Professor Winters became an unexpected mentor, helping me update my design skills and build a portfolio that combined my artistic abilities with my marketing expertise. She introduced me to former students now working in creative fields, expanding my network beyond my father's sphere of influence. I transformed my apartment's second bedroom into a home office and started freelancing as a graphic designer, focusing on branding and marketing materials for small businesses. The work was inconsistent at first, and the pay significantly less than I was accustomed to. But each completed project built both my confidence and my portfolio. My first clients came through Zoe's Connections, a local bakery needing packaging design, a startup tech company requiring presentation templates, small projects with tight budgets. But I approached each one with the same professionalism I'd applied to million-dollar campaigns at Russell Properties. The owner of the bakery was so pleased with my work that she recommended me to her brother, who ran a boutique hotel in Vermont. He needed a complete rebrand and website update, my first major independent project. I worked longer hours than I ever had at my corporate job, fueled by a combination of determination and genuine passion for the work. When the hotel owner shared the finished materials on industry social media, tagging me as the designer, inquiries began coming in from other hospitality businesses. I found myself developing a niche in boutique hotel and restaurant branding work that combined my eye for design with my understanding of marketing psychology. 3 months into freelancing, I received an email that made my stomach drop. The subject line read, "Project Inquiry from Greenwich Heights Development, my father's newest luxury residential project." The message was from his new marketing director, Nathan Caldwell, requesting a proposal for collateral design. Nothing in the email suggested Nathan knew of my connection to Thomas Russell. Either my father was testing me, or Nathan had found my portfolio independently and had no idea about the potential conflict. After careful consideration, I declined the project, citing schedule conflicts. I wasn't ready to test whether I could work adjacent to my father's business interests without being pulled back into his orbit. The following week, I landed a contract with a regional chain of organic grocery stores, my largest client yet. The project would provide financial stability for months and add a significant name to my client list. The timing seemed perfect until I received a call from the marketing manager. "I'm terribly sorry, Ms. Russell, but we need to cancel our contract," she said, sounding genuinely regretful. "We've been advised that working with you could complicate a pending real estate transaction with Russell Properties." My father's sabotage was becoming more direct. He couldn't control me directly anymore, so he was using his business leverage to undermine my new career. It was a painful reminder of his reach and willingness to hurt me professionally, to force me back into dependency. Rather than giving in to despair, I channeled my frustration into expanding beyond local markets. I updated my website to target national clients, joined online professional communities, and leveraged James's international connections to find opportunities beyond my father's influence. The strategy worked. Within weeks, I secured projects from companies in Chicago, Los Angeles, and Toronto. None had real estate interests in Connecticut. None had business relationships with Russell Properties, and all were too large for my father to easily pressure. I also discovered an unexpected talent for business development. Without my father's shadow looming over me, I found my own approach to client relationships more collaborative and transparent than the high-pressure tactics I'd been taught. Clients responded positively often, referring me to others in their network. 6 months after leaving Russell Properties, I was earning enough to support myself comfortably. Not at the luxury level I'd been accustomed to, but with genuine independence. I'd built a client base diversified enough that no single cancellation could devastate me financially. I was working harder than ever, but sleeping better than I had in years. The greatest professional validation came when a design industry blog featured my hotel rebrand in a showcase of emerging talent. The exposure led to an invitation to partner with an established design firm in Boston, an opportunity that would provide both creative freedom and institutional support. As I weighed the offer, I realized something profound for the first time in my adult life. My professional decisions were truly my own. There was no paternal approval to seek, no family expectations to fulfill. Whatever I chose would be based solely on my own goals and values. That realization alone was worth every struggle of the past months. 3 months after our confrontation at the family dinner, I had established a new normal. My finances were stable, if more modest than before. My freelance business was growing steadily. I developed new friendships outside my father's influence and strengthened old ones that had been neglected during my corporate years. I hadn't spoken to my father since the scene at my apartment building, though the messages had continued sporadically. They'd evolved from threats and manipulation to increasingly desperate attempts at reconciliation, though always on his terms. I maintained the boundary of non-response, focusing instead on building my new life. Then James called with unexpected news. "Dad's company is under SEC investigation," he said without preamble. "Something about financial irregularities in the Westport Marina development. It's not public yet, but I have contacts in regulatory circles." I felt a complicated mix of emotions: concern, vindication, worry about potential fallout for former colleagues, but not surprise. The gambling debts and creative accounting I'd glimpsed while extracting my own finances had suggested deeper problems. 2 days later, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. The voice on the other end identified himself as Jeffrey Palmer, my father's personal attorney. "Ms. Russell, your father has requested a meeting with you. A matter of some urgency has arisen regarding family finances." "I've separated my finances from the family," I reminded him. "Whatever the issue is, it doesn't concern me." "I'm afraid it does," Palmer insisted. "It involves the Russell Family Trust, which requires signatures from all beneficiaries for certain transactions. Your father would prefer to discuss this privately rather than through counsel." After consulting with Diana, I agreed to meet at her office, neutral territory, with my own legal representation present. The date was set for the following week. I spent the intervening days preparing myself emotionally for seeing my father again. Diana helped me establish clear boundaries for the meeting and identify potential manipulation tactics to guard against. Marcus provided updates on my financial position, so I could enter the discussion from a position of knowledge and strength. When the day arrived, I was nervous, but resolved. My father entered Diana's conference room looking noticeably different than when I'd last seen him. He'd lost weight, and the confident swagger had diminished. Jeffrey Palmer accompanied him carrying a briefcase full of documents. "Victoria," my father said, his tone carefully neutral. "You look well." "Thank you," I replied simply. "Shall we get to the matter at hand?" Palmer cleared his throat and began explaining the situation in careful legal terms. The essence was this: my father's gambling debts had escalated significantly. To cover them, he needed to liquidate certain family assets, which required my signature as a beneficiary of the original family trust established by my grandparents. "Why would I agree to this?" I asked when Palmer finished. "I've established financial independence specifically to avoid entanglement in these situations." "Because despite our differences, we're still family," my father interjected. "And because without this transaction, Russell Properties faces significant challenges that could affect many innocent employees." It was a masterful appeal targeting both family loyalty and my concern for former colleagues. The old Victoria would have signed immediately, desperate to earn approval and avoid conflict. Instead, I turned to Diana. "What are the implications for me if I decline?" My father's face tightened at this clear indication that I was making my own decision rather than deferring to him. "Legally, none," Diana confirmed. "Your personal finances are now separate. This would be an accommodation to help your father's situation, not an obligation." I considered my options carefully. Despite everything, I didn't want to see my father ruined. not out of lingering need for his approval, but because vengeance wasn't part of who I wanted to be. I'll need to review the specific terms, I said finally. And I have conditions of my own. My father leaned forward eagerly. Whatever you need. We can work something out. First, I want a formal acknowledgement that I am financially independent from Russell family interests signed and notarized. Palmer nodded, making notes. My father's expression remained neutral. Second, I want a written apology for the attempts to sabotage my new business ventures, and a commitment to cease such interference immediately. My father's jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly. Finally, any future relationship between us will be based on mutual respect as adults. No more manipulation, no more control tactics. We either relate as equals or not at all. The conference room fell silent. Palmer looked uncomfortable, clearly unused to hearing anyone speak to Thomas Russell this way. My father stared at me, a complex mix of emotions crossing his face, anger, surprise, and something that might have been reluctant respect. "Those terms are acceptable," he said finally. We spent the next hour reviewing documents while the attorneys drafted additional agreements reflecting my conditions. Throughout the process, I maintained professional composure, neither cold nor overly familiar. I was polite but firm, clear about my boundaries and expectations. As we concluded the meeting, my father lingered while the attorneys stepped out to make copies. "I underestimated you," he said quietly. "You're more like me than I realized." "I'm nothing like you," I replied, but without hostility. "I don't use power to control others. I use it to protect myself and maintain healthy boundaries." "Perhaps that's a distinction I need to learn," he admitted, surprising me with this moment of self-awareness. "This situation has been humbling." I didn't respond immediately, wary of being drawn back into emotional entanglement. But I recognized the significance of my father acknowledging any personal failing, however obliquely. "Maybe we both have things to learn," I offered finally, "but we'll be learning them as equals now." As he turned to leave, I saw something I'd never witnessed before: uncertainty in my father's posture, a man accustomed to dominance, now navigating unfamiliar territory. The power dynamic had indeed shifted, not to create a new imbalance, but to establish a foundation for potential healing on new terms. I left the meeting with mixed emotions, but one clear certainty. I had found my voice, and nothing would silence it again. 6 months after cutting financial ties with my father, my life had transformed in ways both visible and profound. My new apartment, though half the size of my luxury condo, truly felt like home. I'd furnished it gradually with pieces I genuinely loved, rather than the designer-selected items that had filled my previous space. Every corner reflected my personal taste: colorful throw pillows, local artwork, and plants that made the space feel alive. My freelance business had evolved into a formal design studio. I'd hired an assistant, Lily, a recent design school graduate with fresh ideas and boundless enthusiasm. We worked well together, complementing each other's strengths. Having an employee of my own was a responsibility I took seriously, determined never to replicate my father's controlling management style. Most importantly, I'd reconnected with my passion for painting. Every Sunday became sacred studio time, hours spent with canvas and color, with no commercial purpose, just pure creative expression. Some pieces I gave as gifts, others adorned my walls, but the value was in the process itself, the reclaiming of a part of myself long suppressed. The journey of emotional healing paralleled my external changes. On Zoe's recommendation, I began seeing Dr. Landon, a therapist, specializing in family dynamics and emotional abuse. Our weekly sessions helped me recognize patterns I'd normalized: the constant seeking of approval, the equating of love with material provision, the surrender of agency in exchange for security. "What you experienced was a form of gilded cage syndrome," Dr. Landon explained during one session. "Privilege can mask control, making it harder to recognize and easier for others to dismiss when you try to explain it." Those words resonated deeply. For years, people had minimized my struggles because they came wrapped in luxury. "Poor little rich girl" was the unspoken judgment. I'd internalized, making me doubt the legitimacy of my own pain. Acknowledging that wealth didn't negate emotional harm was crucial to my healing process. My relationship with James evolved as well. Without my father as the central reference point in our conversations, we discovered new dimensions to our sibling bond. James visited from London during the holidays, staying in my guest room, rather than the family mansion for the first time. "You seem different," he observed one evening as we shared takeout and wine in my living room. "More yourself somehow." "I'm discovering who that is," I admitted. "It's both terrifying and exhilarating." Romance entered my life unexpectedly through Michael, a graphic artist I met at a design conference. Unlike previous relationships where I'd unconsciously sought men who reminded me of my father, ambitious, controlling status, Conscious Michael was creative, emotionally open, and supportive without being directive. Our connection developed slowly, built on genuine compatibility rather than psychological patterns or my father's approval. The most complex evolution was in my relationship with my father himself. After the meeting in Diana's office, we entered a period of cautious reconstruction. It began with occasional text messages, graduated to monthly coffee meetings at neutral locations, and slowly developed into something resembling a normal father-daughter relationship, though normal was a new concept for both of us. The turning point came when my father experienced a minor health scare, chest pains, that turned out to be stress-related rather than cardiac. During his brief hospital stay, I visited daily, bringing books and keeping him company without sacrificing my boundaries. In that sterile hospital room surrounded by the trappings of mortality, my father initiated the first genuinely honest conversation we'd ever had. "I was afraid of losing you the way I lost your mother," he admitted, looking older than his 65 years. "After she died, I channeled everything into protecting you the only way I knew how, through control and financial security." "I needed a father more than a protector," I replied gently. "I needed guidance, not governance." He nodded slowly. "I don't know how to be that kind of father. I never had the example. But I'd like to learn if you're willing to be patient with an old man's mistakes." It wasn't an explicit apology, but from Thomas Russell, it was unprecedented vulnerability. The path forward wouldn't be simple or straight, but it was a beginning. As my external circumstances stabilized, I found myself increasingly drawn to helping others recognize and escape unhealthy financial dynamics. I began volunteering with a nonprofit that provided financial literacy education to women leaving abusive relationships. Many of these women had experienced more overtly traumatic situations than mine, but the underlying patterns of control were strikingly similar. Financial independence isn't just about money, I would tell participants in workshops. It's about agency, dignity, and the freedom to make your own choices, even imperfect ones. The work was healing for me as much as for them. Each woman who opened her first independent bank account or created her first budget represented a small victory against the systems that enabled control and dependency. On a crisp fall morning, almost exactly 1 year after my confrontation with my father, I stood in my art studio, working on a large abstract canvas that explored themes of confinement and liberation. Swirls of dark blue gave way to expanding spirals of gold and red, my visual representation of the journey from control to freedom. My phone chimed with a reminder my father would be arriving in 30 minutes for our scheduled visit. These monthly meetings at my apartment had become part of our new normal. They were still sometimes awkward, occasionally tense, but increasingly genuine. I cleaned my brushes and changed from my paint-splattered clothes into something casual but presentable. I prepared coffee the way he liked it, strong with just a touch of cream, and set out the almond cookies he'd developed a surprising fondness for since his doctor had restricted his diet. When the doorbell rang, I took a deep breath before answering. My father stood there holding a small gift bag, looking both familiar and somehow changed. "I brought you something," he said, extending the bag after entering. "I found it while going through some old storage boxes." Inside was a small framed sketch, a landscape in colored pencil that I recognized immediately as my own work from high school. It had hung briefly in my mother's hospital room during her final weeks. "She loved this," my father said quietly. "Said it captured how you saw the world, beauty, where others might miss it." I should have given it to you years ago. The simple gesture acknowledgement of both my talent and my mother's appreciation of it moved me deeply. It represented not just the past we shared, but the possibility of a future relationship built on recognition rather than control. Thank you, I said, simply placing the sketch on my mantel. Would you like to see what I'm working on now? As my father followed me to the studio, waiting patiently while I explained my current project, I reflected on the journey of the past year. I had lost wealth but gained worth. I had sacrificed security but found strength. I had risked stability but discovered self-respect. Most importantly, I had learned that true power isn't about controlling others, but about governing yourself, your choices, your boundaries, your definition of success. No fortune could buy that knowledge, and no one could take it away. If you're watching this and struggling with similar dynamics in your own life, remember that taking back your power doesn't happen in a single dramatic moment. It's built through small acts of courage that gradually reshape your reality. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe and hit the like button to help others find it. Remember, financial independence is the foundation of all other freedoms. Thank you for listening to my story.